For the last 200 years, every major war you have ever heard of, and most you have not, followed the same pattern. A crisis appears, flags rise, a narrative forms, and suddenly, nations plunge into conflict. But behind it all, long before the first shot is fired, the money is already moving. Deals are already made, and the profits are already guaranteed. Because wars are not born from chaos, they are engineered. Engineered for influence, engineered for control, engineered for profit. When wars break out, ordinary people are told it's about freedom, security, or justice. But history shows something much colder. The same institutions that help create the war, finance the war, and rebuild after the war are the ones who get richer every time. Meanwhile, countries drown in debt. Inflation rises, taxes increase, young people die, families break, and nothing changes, except who holds power. If we do not recognize the pattern, it will repeat. Because it always has. Over the last 2 centuries, wars have followed a repeating 7-stage profit cycle. No matter the era, Napoleon, World War I, World War II, the Cold War, or the Middle East. The script is the same. 1. Economic stagnation. 2. Narrative shift or threat creation. 3. Funding and arms expansion. 4. Full-scale conflict. 5. Debt explosion. 6. Reconstruction contracts. 7. Consolidation of power. Different flags. Different slogans. Same beneficiaries. Today, we are going to break this machine down and show how it works. Here's how. First, we will explore 3 major historical case studies. 1. The Napoleonic Wars. 2. World War I. 3. World War II. Then, we will reveal how the same pattern evolved into a permanent business model during the Cold War. Finally, we will show how modern conflicts continue the cycle today, from oil geopolitics to the global defense tech economy. We will end with what this pattern means for the next decade and what signs to watch for before the next escalation. By the end of today's episode, you will understand why a single banking family grew so powerful during Napoleon's campaign. They were able to place agents across Europe and profit, whether France won or lost. How U.S. companies sold critical industrial materials to both sides of World War II, before America even entered the war, and how, today, global defense contractors make billions in guaranteed revenue, even when not a single soldier is deployed. Because the business of war does not wait for war. It prepares long before and profits long after. War has always been expensive, but the Napoleonic era transformed it into something much bigger, a global business model. Before Napoleon rose to power, Europe was already fractured, competing alliances, rising nationalism, and unstable monarchies. But none of these forces could sustain war for long, until finance entered the battlefield. The key innovation: nations no longer needed to pay for wars with gold on hand. They could borrow. And once war could be funded by debt, war could be endless. Stage 1. Economic stagnation. European economies were strained, governments broke. Stage 2. Narrative shift. Power vacuum plus revolutionary ideology spread rapidly. Stage 3. Funding and arms expansion. Nations borrowed massively to build armies. Stage 4. Full-scale conflict. Warfare erupted across the continent. Stage 5. Debt explosion. Borrowing skyrocketed. Interest payments ballooned. Stage 6. Reconstruction. Winners plus financiers rebuilt political power dynamics. Stage 7. Consolidation. A new global elite emerged, based not on land, but capital. 1803. France sells Louisiana to the U.S. to raise war capital. Britain raises massive war loans from private banks. A single banking dynasty quietly finances multiple sides, ensuring profit regardless of who wins. Arms industries expand massively. Centralized production grows. After Napoleon's defeat, Europe is drowned in debt. Those holding war bonds gain unprecedented influence. New financial networks emerge, anchored in London. Europe's political map changed. But what truly transformed was the power structure. For the first time in modern history, banks became more powerful than kings. This was the moment war shifted from a battlefield necessity to a financial instrument. And once that door opened, it never closed. When the world slid into World War I, the pattern matured. War was no longer driven just by monarchs or ideology. It was powered by industry, banks, and debt. This was the first conflict where the line between factory and battlefield completely disappeared. Every rifle, every shell, every rail line was money. Stage 1. Economic stagnation. European economies struggled under colonial overextension. Stage 2. Narrative shift. Nationalism spiked. Propaganda cultivated enemies. Stage 3. Funding and arms expansion. Europe poured money into munitions, artillery, mechanization. Stage 4. Conflict ignition. Assassination. War declarations. Treaty web triggers global fire. Stage 5. Debt explosion. Nations borrow massively from banks, especially U.S. banks. Stage 6. Reconstruction. Broken Europe forced to finance its own rebuilding, again, through borrowing. Stage 7. Consolidation. America emerges creditor to the world. Banks become international kingmakers. 1914. Austria-Hungary invades Serbia. Treaty cascade ignites Europe. Britain and France need cash, fast. They turn to private American banks for funding. Munitions companies like Vickers, Schneider, and Krupp scale to unprecedented size. War demand ignites a production boom. Steel, chemicals, fuel. American exports surge. U.S. economy recovers from 1913 recession. Banks provide credit for weapons, but also for post-war reconstruction, ensuring long-term interest payments. Ordinary citizens are taxed. Inflation rises. Bond drives market patriotism. Banks didn't just finance one side, they diversified risk. Because if a nation defaults, a bank still profits by 1. Compounding interest. 2. Securing repayment collateral. 3. Collecting reconstruction fees. 4. Relending under new regimes. War becomes a multi-stage financial product. Before World War I, the U.S. was a debtor nation. After World War I, it became the world's largest creditor. That shift wasn't accidental. It was engineered through lending. After the war, Europe owed America billions. Germany owed Britain and France. Who owed America? So America loaned to Germany. So Germany could pay Britain. So Britain could pay America. A circular debt loop. Profitable, controlled, and inescapable. For the first time ever, international banks realized that lending to both sides of a war allowed them to profit regardless of outcome. Meanwhile, militaries learned that war budgets could be justified indefinitely. World War I proved something crucial. If you control the financing, you don't need to fire a shot to win. If World War I industrialized profit, World War II globalized it. The stakes were bigger, the budgets were bigger, and the rewards historic. After the Great Depression devastated the world, economies were desperate. Factories were idle. Commodity prices collapsed. Millions unemployed. A perfect setup for the war profit cycle to activate again. Stage 1. Economic stagnation. Worldwide depression cripples economies. Stage 2. Narrative shift. Nationalist movements rise. New enemy emerges. Stage 3. Funding and arms expansion. Massive government spending. Tanks, planes, fuel, logistics. Stage 4. Full-scale conflict. Global war. Total mobilization. Stage 5. Debt explosion. Record borrowing. War bond campaigns. Tax hikes. Stage 6. Reconstruction. Massive rebuild contracts. Industrial renewal. Stage 7. Consolidation. Dollar gains reserve status. U.S. dominates financial architecture. 1933 to 1939. Rearmament revitalizes economies in Germany, Japan, UK, and U.S. U.S. industry sells fuel, engines, and materials globally before entering the war. 1941. Pearl Harbor. U.S. mobilizes. Industrial output surges. Aircraft corporations, oil giants, and steel suppliers reach unprecedented scale. Allied victory. Europe devastated requires massive rebuilding. 1948. Marshall Plan directs billions into Europe. Money flows from U.S. Treasury. U.S. industries. European reconstruction. Newly rebuilt Europe becomes economic client under dollar system. U.S. currency replaces British pound. Wall Street becomes global finance center. Armies win wars, but corporations win peace. Construction firms, energy companies, logistics suppliers, and banks all secure long-term contracts. War debt, peace debt. Either way, the financiers win. War became a scalable business. Support the build-up, supply the battles, fund reconstruction, control the future. And the nation best positioned to do it became the new empire. The United States wasn't just victorious militarily. It became the financial architect of the modern world. World War II ended, but the war economy did not. A new kind of conflict emerged, not total mobilization, not global invasion, but a permanent state of controlled tension, a war without end. Because a war that never ends generates profit that never stops. After 1945, U.S. leaders faced a question: what happens to the massive industrial machine we just built for the war? The answer: keep it running. Not for peace, but for preparation. Defense became a permanent line item, built into the structure of the American economy. And so began the era of what President Eisenhower called the military-industrial complex. Stage 1. Economic adjustment: shift from wartime production, sustainable demand needed. Stage 2. Narrative shift: a new, existential threat emerges: communism. Stage 3. Funding and arms expansion: Cold War budgets justify continuous arms production. Stage 4. Conflict ignition: proxy wars, Korea, Vietnam, Afghanistan, never total war. Stage 5. Debt plus taxation: decades of military expenditure become permanent. Stage 6. Reconstruction and influence: nations rebuilt under U.S. economic orbit. Stage 7. Consolidation: U.S. corporations and banks expand globally under security umbrella. 1947. Truman Doctrine frames ideological conflict: the U.S. must defend the world from communism. 1949. NATO forms guaranteed, institutional military structure. 1950 to 1953. Korean War: first major Cold War conflict. Wartime spending proves profitable. 1955 to 1975. Vietnam War: the longest and most commercially significant conflict of the era. Chemical, aircraft, and defense giants scale massively. 1960 to 1980. Arms races in nuclear, aerospace, and surveillance tech. 1979 to 1989. Soviet-Afghan War: U.S. supplies weapons, arms profits spike. The Cold War introduced something groundbreaking: weaponized anticipation. You didn't need a real war every year, just the threat of one. The fear of Soviet aggression became a renewable economic resource. Congressional budgets swelled. Defense contracts guaranteed decades of revenue. Tech industries grew under military funding. War became a subscription model. Direct confrontation with the USSR was too risky, so proxy wars became the preferred format. Vietnam, Korea, Afghanistan, Central America, Middle East conflicts. Small countries became chess pieces, test grounds for weapons, and new markets for reconstruction finance. These conflicts were long, savage, but controlled. Controlled, because there was always one absolute rule: the war must not end quickly. More time equals more money. During the Cold War, military strategy, intelligence agencies, and private industry formed a triad: Pentagon, intelligence, defense, corporations. The Pentagon sets the threat narrative. Intelligence identifies targets and partners. Corporations supply weapons plus logistics. All funded by taxpayers. Profits private. Costs public. War was no longer episodic. It became infrastructure, a permanent economic pillar, protected by secrecy, justified by fear, driven by profit. This shift ensured that even without large-scale invasion, the war machine never slept. If the Cold War perfected the conflict subscription model, the Middle East made it tangible, physical, liquid, because here, war was tied directly to the world's most essential commodity: oil. After World War II, the U.S. made a strategic move: tie global oil trade to the U.S. dollar. That single decision meant that every nation, from Europe to Asia, had to hold dollars to buy energy. This guaranteed decades of dollar demand, U.S. financial dominance, petrostate alliances. But there was a problem. The Middle East was unstable, and instability was both a threat and a massive business opportunity. Stage 1. Resource dependence: oil drives global economy. Stage 2. Narrative construction: threats, regime change, ideology. Stage 3. Military buildup: weapons, bases, alliances. Stage 4. Direct or proxy conflict: Iraq, Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Gulf War. Stage 5. Debt plus energy price shocks: war spikes, oil prices, global inflation. Stage 6. Reconstruction contracts: companies rebuild infrastructure and energy systems. Stage 7. Consolidation control over physical resources plus monetary system. 1953, Iran democratically elected leader overthrown, Western-aligned regime installed. 1967 to 1973, Arab conflicts arms sales surge. 1973, oil crisis massive profits for energy companies plus banks. 1980 to 1988, Iran, Iraq war weapons flow, both sides supplied. 1991, Gulf War US-led coalition, reconstruction contracts afterward. 2001 to 2021, Afghanistan longest US war, trillions spent contractors profit. 2003, Iraq war energy plus reconstruction contracts concentrated among few firms. War destroys infrastructure. Then corporations rebuild it, with taxpayer-funded contracts. Roads, pipelines, power grids, ports. The same pattern from Napoleon's Europe reappears in Baghdad. 2 centuries later, the Middle East proved that control the energy, control the currency, control the world. And conflict, engineered or encouraged, remains the mechanism. Today, the war business has evolved again into cyber defense, drone technology, private security, and resource extraction. Different battlefield, same profit cycle. Today, wars look different. They're quieter, cleaner, digitized. But underneath, the same financial gears are still turning, just faster and hidden behind new layers of technology, media, and global finance. Where past wars required tanks and trenches, modern conflict requires cyber defense, AI targeting, private intelligence, economic sanctions, surveillance infrastructure. These are bloodless on the surface, but financially explosive beneath it. War migrated from the battlefield. Companies once known for building missiles now build software. A global shift from building iron to building information, from artillery to algorithms, from territory to data. This creates a new kind of warfare, invisible, constant, profitable. Private firms now secure communications, national energy grids, banking networks, elections, transport systems. Every threat, real or perceived, justifies new contracts, and the money keeps flowing. In the past, nations fought with national armies. Today, governments hire private militaries. Contractors supply security forces, logistics, weapons systems, reconnaissance. They operate outside traditional oversight. Less accountability, more profit. During recent conflicts, private firms earned hundreds of billions, often with no market competition. Taxpayer money out, private profit in. Modern conflict is structured like a subscription model. Instead of build, fight, end, it's prepare, upgrade, maintain, prepare. No ending required. Every year, defense budgets rise. New enemies emerge. New technologies appear. And the cycle continues. If the Cold War was the birth of permanent conflict, the 21st century is its automation. Not all battles use weapons. Some use spreadsheets, sanctions, tariffs, trade blocks. These are acts of war by financial means. And guess who manages them? Banks, global institutions, private intelligence firms. War is outsourced to finance and data. And once again, the pattern holds. Create pressure, engineer conflict, profit from instability. The 2008 crisis looked like an accident, but its consequences mirrored post-war reconstruction. Massive failures, central banks intervene, private institutions acquire assets, public debt increases, wealth concentrates. Same pattern, without a bullet fired. War by financial collapse. Stage 1. Economic stagnation post 2008. Global inequality surges. Stage 2. Narrative shift. New threats. Global terrorism, cyber war, great power rivalry. Stage 3. Funding and arms expansion. Budgets pour into tech plus defense giants. Stage 4. Conflicts, Ukraine, Middle East, Africa, Pacific tensions. Stage 5. Debt explosion, nations borrow, inflation rises. Stage 6. Reconstruction and tech expansion, contracts awarded, reforms enforced. Stage 7. Consolidation. Wealth plus power migrate upward. Different tools, same structure. A new coalition of beneficiaries. Defense tech corporations, banks, cybersecurity firms, private intelligence agencies, reconstruction companies. And above them, global financial institutions. This network profits in every direction. Before conflict, arms build up. During conflict, weapons plus logistics. After conflict, reconstruction loans and contracts. 3 profit phases. Every time. Always the same. Taxpayers, workers, soldiers, households through inflation. The money flows upward. The risk flows downward. Pattern indicators show rising tension along U.S. China rivalry, Middle East instability, European rearmament, cyber plus AI militarization, energy system restructuring. History doesn't repeat exactly, but its patterns do. And economically, global conditions resemble every pre-conflict period of the last 200 years. High debt, slow growth narratives, shifting new enemies forming. These are the early signals. The machine is already warming up. Now that we've traveled from Napoleon to World War I to World War II, through the Cold War, and into the modern Middle East and digital era, a single truth becomes unavoidable. War is not an anomaly. War is a system built on debt, resources, reconstruction, consolidation. And the more we look, the more we see the same pattern, repeating with almost mechanical precision. Let's stitch the pattern together one last time. Stage 1. Economic stagnation. Countries face slowing growth, pressure builds. Stage 2. Narrative shift. Power brokers identify an enemy, real or constructed. Stage 3. Funding and arms expansion. Defense budgets balloon, industries boom. Stage 4. Conflict proxy or full war triggers consumption of weapons plus resources. Stage 5. Debt explosion. Nations borrow heavily, taxpayers absorb the burden. Stage 6. Reconstruction, infrastructure rebuilt, contracts awarded, new loans created. Stage 7. Consolidation, elite institutions tighten, power system resets. And then, slowly, it loops back to stage 1. Rinse. Repeat. If you follow the incentives, the pattern makes perfect sense. War creates demand, debt, dependency. All 3 are profitable. Peace does not. And so long as war is more profitable than peace, peace will remain temporary. Winners: banks, defense contractors, reconstruction firms, energy monopolies, intelligence and surveillance industries. Losers: soldiers, citizens, small businesses, future generations. Those who pay with blood and taxes are never the ones who profit. Because the system is self-reinforcing. War channels money into defense. Defense lobbies for more spending. Spending requires new threats. New threats justify expansion. Expansion increases dependence. Dependence leads to conflict. Conflict generates profit. Profit strengthens the system. Every cycle increases the power of those who benefit and decreases the power of those who don't. It is a machine that feeds on fear, paid for by debt, and protected by secrecy. This is not about shadowy villains in hidden rooms. It's about institutional incentives. Systems do not require conspiracies to behave predictably. They just need profit motives, repeatable processes, enforcement mechanisms. War is all 3. That's why the pattern repeats with such precision. If you know what to look for, the signs always appear in advance. Heavy checkmark, rising debt, economic stagnation, shifting media narratives, enemy construction, sudden arms buildup, diplomatic breakdown. By the time the first shot is fired, the real battle, the financial one, is already won. Because the world, today, is sitting squarely in the early stages of this cycle, again. High global debt, new enemy narratives, energy instability, defense budgets rising, tech militarization, great power rivalries. We've seen these signals before. Every time, they pointed to escalation. We're watching stage 2 and stage 3 unfold in real time. Soon, stage 4 becomes inevitable. War isn't just about land or ideology. It's about restructuring power. Every major conflict of the last 200 years has resulted in a new global order, a new reserve currency, a new financial hegemon. Napoleon: Britain ascends. World War I: US emerges. World War II: dollar dominates. Cold War: US consolidates. Iraq: petrodollar reinforced. The pattern isn't just economic. It's geopolitical. War is a reset button. Throughout history, every nation believed this time is different. But it never is. Because the incentives never change. The machinery never sleeps. And those who benefit from conflict still sit closest to the levers of power. The pattern doesn't require conspiracy, only momentum. Once it starts, it keeps going until the cycle is complete. And right now, we are deep inside that cycle. Let's locate ourselves in the 7-stage cycle. Stage 1. Economic stagnation. Global debt is at record highs. Growth is slowing. Stage 2, narrative shift. New enemies are defined. Russia, China, Iran, cyber threats. Stage 3, arms expansion. Defense budgets are surging worldwide. Nations are rearming, which means the next step is Stage 4, conflict. Maybe not next year, but the incentives are aligning. And history tells us, once the alignment is complete, the trigger is pulled. Watch for these signs: rapid arms procurement, broad sanctions, media escalation, market instability, diplomatic breakdowns, cyber attacks, justification events. When enough signals merge, the narrative becomes inevitable, and the public is told, we have no choice, even though the choice was made long before. Wars are fought by ordinary people who never chose them. Workers, farmers, students, parents, children. Those who benefit almost never bleed. Those who bleed almost never benefit. The real casualties are not just bodies, but futures. Tax burdens, inflation, lost opportunity, displacement, trauma. Wars don't just destroy cities. They destroy generations. The only defense against this machine is awareness. Because once you recognize the pattern, you begin to see how the story is written. Long before the chapters unfold, you stop falling for narratives. You stop reacting emotionally. You start asking, who benefits? Who pays? Where does the money go? Because money is the true map. Follow it, and you'll always find the war before it begins. History doesn't repeat because people forget. It repeats because the system that profits from war remains untouched. If you want to understand where this cycle goes next, if you want to decode the signs before the headlines arrive, if you want to learn how to protect wealth and freedom during the next stage, then stay with us. Subscribe, because in future episodes, we'll break down where the next conflict is most likely to begin, which industries will benefit, how economies shift before and after war, and how individuals can prepare. This isn't about fear. It's about foresight, because once you see the pattern, you can never unsee it. Thank you for watching. Stay aware and stay prepared.